What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo. And on this episode of Inside the Mind, going to be talking to my guy, Matthew Belman, mbelman967 on DraftKings, Fantasy Tips Matt on X or Twitter. If you go check him out there, but really cool. Going to break it all down. He's going to go through a little bit of a more of a hybrid episode, if you will. We're going to talk like an Inside the Mind mixed with Behind the Mind, where you can give some of his background story. But Matt, I'll bring you in right away, man. We really appreciate you doing this. A lot of the community was clamoring to have you on. And then you go out and ship like 120, 160K, whatever it was. Like, yeah, now you really got to get him on. But we were planning this anyway, man. So what's going on?
Nothing, bro. Yeah, really happy to be on here with you. We have been chatting a little bit outside of this. So happy we could connect for sure. As I was telling you a little bit earlier, my wife has been obsessed with your screen name ever since we saw you at the live finals in Denver like 2 or 3 years ago at this point. Pretty crazy live finals. I like to forget that one, though. I had 5 entries, and I think was dead in all of them by halftime of the games.
Yeah, that was a crazy one. Petty Theft won it. It was like and shout out to your wife. I appreciate that, by the way. But I'll
No
tell
doubt.
you in a second. But the Petty Theft win where it went to OT, needed it was like a Curry steal and then hit a 3 to force overtime. So the whole room went nuts. The reaction of everything was crazy because it really affected a lot of people that thought they were about to win a lot of money, and others that were like, oh, wait, now I could win all the money with Petty and his crew. So it was kind of a crazy one. Nerdy Tenor was there actually at the same time. He's from the area, but he was winning the NHL live final. He kind of ran away with that one. I think he won by like 30 or 40 points. So that was just nuts. It was kind of over before it started. But I like Denver, pretty crazy city and great event. But the username, I used to have one like you. I had like my first initial, last name, everything. And what happened was when I came up with ToeTagginTambo, and I've told the story, but it was kind of my guy Head Chopper over at RG. I really liked that one. I was like, well, I can't completely copy. So I thought about this one, playing tournaments, put them in a body bag, put the toe tag on them and win this thing.
Dude, it's amazing.
What? Yeah.
So good.
It was the thought process. But yeah, the people at DraftKings didn't want to let people change their names, but it was still so early and back in the day. And I was like, honestly, it's a privacy issue. I said, like, my name, now my full name is everywhere. It was more of, I just really wanted to change my name.
Yeah.
Kicker. They were like, all right, fine. We'll give you one exception. And they let me change. That's the key.
That's awesome because you have one of the best names, if not the best names in the game. I mean, ToeTagginTambo, like it just fits. I liked your reasoning for how you came up on them, just, dancing on them after you shipped some GPPs. That's awesome, man. I love that story, and yeah, mad respect to your name. It always stands out whenever I see you in contests, for sure.
I appreciate it. I'm glad I could live up to it a little bit and make it happen. Because if you had that kind of name and you don't ship anything, then it's like, well, what are you really doing in these tournaments? So yeah, maybe I'm happy it worked out that way. But this thing always just flows, man. We always just go through some of the stuff, and I think the biggest thing on doing a hybrid episode like this is sort of just start with some of your background, your history. For those that don't know you, just let them know a little bit about yourself. You talk about being a family man, where you're from, how you got started in DFS. Maybe just let us know anything like that to get things rocking.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep the long background story a little bit short, just because I could go on for hours talking about whatever. But I'm born and raised in like the suburbs of Cleveland. So lived here before college. I went away for college. I went to school in New Orleans, as I was telling you about before. But prior to that, spent my whole upbringing here. Am now back here now. Never thought that I would move back here once I went to college, and then I lived in Colorado after that. But, family does a lot. Wanted to be closer to home. My wife is from here, so kind of just, worked out in that regard. So still settled in pretty close to where I grew up, about randomly like 5 minutes away from my parents on one side and 5 minutes away from my wife's mom on the other side. So we got it pretty nice in that regard. I am a family man, as we talked about. I got a soon-to-be 3-year-old. She's in the next room sleeping, and I got another one on the way. Haven't really talked about that too much, but got another one on the way due in September, so that's exciting. Yeah, going to be a full household, no doubt. But yeah, man. So yeah, big family man. I'll take it back to kind of when I started in DFS. Like I said, when I went to college in New Orleans. Wasn't the most studious. So growing up, my dad owned a lumber company. Was always something that I thought I was going to be into. I'm extremely close with my dad, still am to this day. Went to college thinking I would do that. So didn't spend too much of my time studying. We'll put it that way. Spent a lot of time partying. Was a fun experience for sure. And then got a job at another lumber company in Colorado. That's why I originally moved to Denver, got a job with another lumber company to give me experience to move back home and eventually like work with my dad and stuff. Well, after working at the company in Colorado, I realized pretty quickly it wasn't for me. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't like the industry. I didn't like much about it. Wasn't going to be something I could see myself doing for the long term. So I got another job while I lived in Colorado, was successful doing that, had fun, played, had fun, had a lot of fun doing that stuff, but eventually wanted to move back home. So moved back home, and I started at that point. This is like, man, as we were talking about before, I'm 40 years old now. It's 2025. It's crazy to say. So probably 12 years ago at this point, moved back home. Probably 15 years ago at this point, moved back home, somewhere in between there. I don't even know the exact age. Started to dabble in DFS. It wasn't obviously big at that point. Whenever I started playing, it wasn't something that I was doing full time or even thought I would do full time. It was just dabbling in it, playing on the side, having some fun with it. When I moved back to Cleveland, I was working in commercial real estate, and it was fine. I, enjoyed it. It was fine as a job, whatever. But I was also playing DFS on the side. And I started to become pretty successful with it. Not like crazy successful. I wasn't playing for big dollars, but I had been playing fantasy sports my whole life. So kind of had, knew what I was doing, without really knowing what I was doing. Obviously now looking back on it, I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew enough where I thought I was good. And that's all that mattered at that point. Started getting more into it, had not like a huge hit, but for the amount I was playing, decent money, grew my bankroll a little bit. And at that point, I was searching for, I knew of Roto Grinders. I knew of, at that point, Awesemo, but those were only like the really only two big ones out at that point. So I started when I was doing my research. I found a guy who I was kind of drawn to. His name was Ryan Kostrowski. He had a site called the DFS 5-Pack. I reached out to him. We became kind of tight, and we eventually became partners in the DFS 5-Pack. Ran that with him for like 5 years up until COVID. It was a good time, man. Giving DFS advice, having a community. It was mostly Facebook at that point. Discord wasn't really a thing. So ton of Facebook members. We had a bunch of different groups. It was a good time making videos daily, giving advice. I'm a big GPP player. I like to play contrarian. My partner at that time, Ryan, was more of a cash game player. So the mix of the minds, if you will, kind of worked, and we had a nice little following. As you know, and I'm sure a lot of people watching know, COVID changed a lot of things. So just the no sports things for a small company that really relied on just monthly customer base, just changed a lot because there wasn't sports going on. So, for lack of better reasons other than just there wasn't enough going on, he needed stuff to do. He had 2 kids at the time. My wife was pregnant, decided to kind of part ways and not continue that. He wasn't really going to play DFS anymore. I was kind of just starting my DFS journey, if you will. I was starting to acclimate myself with the tools at Stochastic, still awesome at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was starting to have some bigger success. So at that point, like I said, there was no longer the DFS 5-Pack. I wasn't as focused on giving advice to people because that wasn't what I was doing anymore. I was really just focused on playing. I had some other stuff I was doing on the side in Cleveland, but that's what most of my time was going to. Again, started really acclimating myself with the tools, had some bigger hits, and I mean, the rest is kind of history. We are where we are today. I'm doing some stuff for Stochastic now. I don't remember exactly when the name changed, but yeah, I like what I'm doing. I'm playing DFS mostly full time. I still have some stuff I'm doing in Cleveland, but this is taking up most of my time. I know I just went on like a 10-minute spiel, so feel free to hop in here.
That's the story, man. We want that from you, so that's perfect. What sports are you primarily focused on right now? We'll go back to the story, but right now, what are you focused on?
So I'm a baseball head. I'm a seam head at heart for sure. Fun fact, my initials are MLB. My sister's initials are MLB. My dad is a huge baseball fan, grew up on baseball. Baseball is my favorite sport. Baseball is what got me into fantasy sports. I was in a fantasy baseball league with my dad, like for, bigger money for me at the time or for him, whatever you want to call it. 7 years old, doing live drafts. Bill Lambier, former great Detroit Piston, was in one of the leagues. I remember seeing him at a draft. So kind of just what I grew up on. And baseball is still definitely core to my heart. It's my favorite sport. It's the sport I enjoy most. I've had a lot of success playing MLB DFS. So for me, it's MLB, NFL when it's going on, NBA certainly when it's going on. NBA is where I've had the most success. And then I love the esports. I love LOL DFS. That's probably my favorite, which is just crazy because I don't even know how to play the game, but there's something about it that I'm just drawn to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And obviously we're going to talk some baseball for sure later on. People definitely want to get some theory and some thoughts around your process and just ideas, and me specifically too, just on like the one lineup versus single entry. So we'll save that for a little bit from now. Just going back though to the backstory a little bit further, like when you talked about your first big hit and building up the bankroll and sort of rolling it from there, and then sort of deciding at some point, okay, I'm going to keep rolling with this and see what happens. What were some of the turning points for you? Or what was, not everybody has like an aha moment. That's kind of cliche, but like there had to be something at some point. I know some people say it's like figuring out that it's a game and it's not really just the sport that, you don't, sometimes you don't have to know the sport at all. Like you just talked about with esports, you don't even know how to play the game, but you know how to play the DFS game. But what was sort of the turning point for you, or something where you said, I want to do this more seriously, and I'm learning to play the game this way, or something along those lines? What would you categorize it as?
Oh, so that's a great question. I've got a couple different ways to answer it. I'll take it in kind of two different paths.
Sure.
So the first, like, this wasn't even a big win, but before I like started with Ryan, my partner, the DFS 5-pack, I remember winning like the $20 3-entry max. And again, I was playing for small ducats at that point, like nothing much. I wasn't even considering it doing full time, but that's when I was like, man, like if I put time and energy and effort towards this to make myself smarter about what this really is, then I think I can be successful with that. Then as I was going with Ryan, I won this is NBA. I won the 153 entry max. And again, that was like the biggest contest I was playing. I wasn't playing like the 555. So that's that point. This is like years ago. Been married like 7 years, something like that. I hope my wife isn't watching, but like, I think this is around when we got married, maybe even before. So like years ago at this point, I think before we got married, that kind of cemented to me that like, again, I was putting more time, more energy towards it. I was really doing my research, and that kind of cemented me that like, I could have a chance, at least in these like smaller contests where people weren't 150 maxing and I was on a level playing field. At least that's how I kind of thought to myself. And so those were kind of the two like aha moments. But the biggest aha moment, when I really hear that question, came well after that. And it didn't come until, I don't even know the exact moment, but a lot of my time playing DFS, when I was running the DFS 5-pack, giving advice, a lot of what I focused on was being contrarian. And I think that is important in DFS. Obviously, we're playing an ownership game, but I think that gets really, really overblown. And I'll put it like this. This was kind of the aha thing I thought to myself, and I've heard people say this. The object of the game isn't to have like the most contrarian lineup. It's to win. So you can have the most contrarian guys and guys that really stand out from that aspect, but the goal of the game, especially if you're doing this to make an income, is to win. So it's not about just being contrarian. I know this is like a really obscure answer, but that's just what I think about when you ask me that question.
No, it's great. And I think that's like something that people have to understand, is that I try and, obviously we're teaching it here and going through it together as a community to talk through it all and break it all down. But some of the concepts around, like, a lot of people get caught up in certain plays or what some would call over leveraging, when in reality, you can win with an over leveraged lineup. We see Millie Maker winners with 6 guys under 5% before, and you're like, well, that's a bit crazy. Probably didn't need to go that, but they didn't need to, but they did, and it won. So it's still got, like, that's what you were saying. It's not that you can't do it, but I think a lot of people look for too many of these diamond in the rough plays, or they start to look for stuff that they just think that's what makes them good. And it's like, there's some of the best players in the world are playing stuff that makes sense. Like I said, I don't want to keep teasing it, but obviously we'll get into it. We get to like your baseball lineup from the other night as a prime example, but I think there's also a prime reasoning. I'm interested to hear yours, and then I'll give my thoughts on it. But I think that's the key, is you can find good lineups that still have leverage in some way, shape, or form. But for me, it was always like figuring out that roster construction, game theory, all of this stuff ends up mattering a lot more than the actual plays. And it's why I originally coined the term of, it's not who you play, it's how you play them. Totally. That's the kicker. Like, you can play anyone. It's just think about what the rest of the build looks like, any sport. It doesn't matter if it's basketball, baseball, football, whatever. You can use this same process or thought concepts and apply it to your process. So anything else you want to add on that is up to you. But if not, we can keep it rolling.
It's all about building good lineups, right? It's not about the plays. The plays will change on an even night. It's all about building good lineups. And now that has changed because the Sims are now pumping out lineups. But I heard you talk to Sheets a little bit about this. You can go in the weeds about the Sims and whether those lineups are actually quote unquote good or not. So yeah.
No,
you know, I'm thinking about this right now, and I'll even shout him out. One of the best DFS players in the world, who's been, especially right now, is Third and Schlong.
Yeah.
He plays the best plays on pretty much every slate he's on, and he wins a lot. So there are multiple ways to skin the cat. I'm just mentioning him because he plays a lot of the sports I play, and he's at the top of the leaderboard all the time, playing just the quote unquote best plays. So it can be done that way. It can be done being more contrarian, but I think you said it best. It's not about like however you put it. It's not about the plays. It's how you build your lineups.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I was going to say that as far as the Sims thing goes, because you brought that up, we've had a lot of conversations around contest Sims, and it's, you know, it's two streets to it for sure, because it's just like what you just said. There's tons of ways to get there. In the end, I think some people think when they hear Sims, oh, it's doom and gloom. Like if they got the Sims and I don't, I'm going to lose. Like you got there the other night with one lineup, whether you use Sims or not. The point is you can still get there. It's just, you can build lineups accordingly. You can use other tools. You can use your data, knowledge, etc., to be able to build good lineups. It's the Sims give different thought processes, ideas, things like that. And like you said, you can go in the weeds on that stuff of how good the fields are that you're up against.
Right.
Sheets' exact words were, someone like Andy, who's the CEO of SaberSim, won't even remember this stuff that he's building with his team right now on the back end and the developers over at Saber when it comes 3 years from now, because it'll be a totally different level of play versus right now. So things can change on a dime, but there's also things you can do with what you currently have. No different than before contest Sims even existed. There was people that were better with rules and groups and using the optimizer to give them some of these angles, but it all still comes back down to the game and thinking about the moves that you're making and what others are doing. You're playing against other people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I like what Sheets and you were talking about in the sense that like a lot of what the Sims are pushing out, it's an ownership game, right? Like, and if ownership is off, then lineups are just going to be off. Yeah. So like, especially in a sport like baseball, where projection, it's just not that projectable. Like starting pitching is much more projectable than hitting, but even starting pitching is way less projectable in a sport like NBA. So ownership really, really matters. And if ownership is off, because for one reason or another, all these Sims just have a misrepresentation of what ownership's actually going to be, then like the Sims, you can make a case like aren't even pushing out good lineups. If everyone's playing those lineups though, then some of them are going to be good. It's like almost like what came first, the chicken or the egg type of theory. Like, you know, I don't know if we'll ever really know the answer.
Yeah. And I think it's like, again, can you use them to your advantage? And that was another thing Sheets talked about. You know, our boy, I keep bringing him up here, but he's super sharp.
He's the man.
Yeah. And the other thing he was talking about is if you could, you know, those that will be most successful with the contest Sims are going to be using the Sims and their aspect of knowing, quote unquote, knowing ball, but also I really think it comes down to knowing DFS. And I did a mentorship call earlier today, and I'll give the example here because you've kind of leaned into it. Now I'm here, so I might as well go with it. But give me your thoughts on this. Was like, just there's always a level to everything. And just using NFL because it's the most common sport with pretty much everyone is like, okay, you'd make the decision that you're going to fade Saquon Barkley at 45% ownership. Okay, that's a decision. That's one level. You've made that call. Now you look at your line. I'm just using a single entry perspective. People just automatically think, okay, I just got to pivot then. But it's not always about the pivots around him. It may be a build that's different because you didn't go with him, meaning if you don't go with him, you go down to sort of mid-range or lower-priced running backs. Well, now you're on a different roster construction. But wait a minute, there's another level because the books still have, and I'm not saying the books are perfect, but they're doing a good job, I hear, where if they still have the Eagles for 30.5 points, and it's not going to be Barkley, and you now are no longer on an expensive running back, well, a mid-range running back or a cheap running back could now get you to Jalen Hurts naked for the tush push. They're still putting up 30 points. No one's really on Jalen Hurts. It could get as leverage. It could get you to Hurts and AJ Brown and see how you then, like, not that you need this training, but for others, it's all about people learning. Like, that's like a level to it where it's like you said, people are still just relying on a number and a button and a sim and all this stuff. It will sometimes find this for you, but don't be shook by it when you see it, because that's kind of the concept. It's pulling everything together. You can do it with or without the Sims. You just have to see it. And no Barkley, but now I can get to a different roster construction with mid-range or cheaper running backs. And when I land there, it gives me the affordability to find the perfect leverage for Barkley in Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown when the books also still have the Eagles scoring 30.5 points as their over-under. Like maybe they don't hit it, maybe they do. But if you're off Barkley and you still think they're going to put up the points, you shouldn't be afraid to go down that road. So just little things like that. I'm not sure how you think about that, but even if I just had one lineup, I would be thinking about some of that stuff.
I mean, you have to, certainly, depending on the contest you're playing, especially when you get a player like of that stature that's going to project so well. I mean, you have to think about that. But again, I will go back to, it's not just about it's not about the plays. It's about how you build your lineups or line up, however you're doing it. It's interesting. And it kind of also goes back to the fact that there's just so many ways to skin the cat and everything. I think I was watching your guys' show yesterday on MLB, just, because I think it was on and I wanted to catch some MLB talk, and I was listening to it, and they were talking about how, maybe not stacking 5 threes, maybe going 5 1-1-1s or 5 2-1s or whatever is the better way to go, or maybe 4 threes or whatever, because why are you settling on guys at the bottom of your stack that, aren't good hitters, that wouldn't be worth playing if you weren't stacking them? And I get that. I really have no argument with that. But the other side I would say is when you're stacking a team, a lot of what you're doing is playing against that opposing pitcher, right? And you just want as many hitters as you can get against that opposing pitcher, that opposing pitching staff, etc. So it doesn't even matter who the hitters are. You just want them in your lineup, whoever they are, whatever salaries that work. In baseball, especially, the salaries don't even matter. So it kind of just goes into what you were talking about with Barkley, and that, again, there are so many ways to be right about this stuff, but in the same vein, there are so many ways to be wrong. So that's why it's often, especially when you play GPPs all the time, like I do, it can be a struggle when you don't have a big win.
Yeah. 100%. And you said it best there, but that was kind of the point I was trying to prove and make. It's just that's people will make one decision, but they won't let it, they won't bleed it into the rest of their decisions. And then hindsight's 20/20, but this is the other analogy I give it. The plane took off. When you realize that you got the Barkley fade right, you're probably pretty happy. But as you're watching A.J. Brown score his second touchdown on a 100-yard bonus catch, you're like, damn, I not only had the money to get there with the Barkley fade, but I didn't get to that anyway. And it's that's where you missed and somebody else got it. And you're like, oh, well, how did they get to it? Well, it's very clear how they got to it. It's just you made one step towards it. They made 2 or 3 steps on top of it. They changed it. They went off Barkley with you. They then changed the roster construction, but due to the roster construction change, they got this in there. And you talked about it in baseball, which we're going there shortly anyway, but going against a pitcher on that slate that others are on, and you're already going that way anyway, so why not continue with the stack and the bats? And again, when we get into the baseball stuff here just very shortly, we will. Real quick, just something else I wanted to talk about on the background and the process side and all that sort of stuff, but are you mostly, I know we're going to get to the single entry, you played one lineup versus, we'll talk one lineup versus single entry, but are you usually just playing one lineup a night in baseball, or do you ever MME it? What's sort of your MME versus 1 to 3 max style?
For baseball, I usually am playing 3 to 4 lineups a night. That night I was on a show and had some stuff to do right after. So I didn't want to get tied down with it just because I couldn't. Baseball is easier, but that was all I was committed to that night. I actually debated on playing 4 lineups, just variations of that one lineup, and instead of playing that one lineup super heavy, playing all 4 of them a little bit lighter. Glad I didn't do that, because that lineup was the best version of them all with Tyler Malley. So sometimes stuff works out like that. Just like anyone else in DFS, I've had so many, man. I mean, this happened 2 weeks ago. I remember a daytime baseball slate, Bobby Gomes, true legend in this game, a guy I respect and talk to all the time, took second in an MLB, day slate 555. I changed my lineup an hour into lock. If not, I would have taken second in that contest. That stuff happens to me all the time, just like it does everyone else. And you really only remember the bad parts. But I will say, on this particular slate, I only played one lineup. I could not decide for the life of me between, and this is just a little bit of inside the mind here. I know that's what you like.
Got it. Yeah.
I really could not. I liked the Athletics a lot. We had done a show. I did it with a show with EMAC that day. Talked about the A's, loved their ownership. I'm going to plug Stochastic's tools here because they're just amazing, and I've used them for years, and they've brought me a lot of success. But I like the Athletics. I like Bailey Ober at his price tag, even though I didn't love the matchup. And then for the other SP I was going to use, it was either Tyler McGill or Tyler Malley. And I liked McGill like early on in the day. It was McGill and Ober is who I was going to use. But not even the sims, when I used their what's called single lineup simulator, you plug your lineup in and it tells you the ROI, et cetera, et cetera. It liked the lineup with McGill. It absolutely loved the lineup with Malley. So I literally was going back and forth. I mean, I must have changed it. And I never do this. I don't like changing my lineups. I must have changed it 4 times. I'm messaging my buddy. I messaged him at 7:30. McGill locked at 7:40. I said, I've never been this, not distressed, but I've never had this much of a toss-up between McGill and Malley. I had McGill in my lineup. I changed it to McGill, even though the sims were pushing Malley. And at 7:39, I was like, man, like I use these tools. Like I'm smart, but I'm also smart enough to know when the tools are smarter than me. I just got to use Malley here. He's going to be low owned. So at 7:39, I went on to DK to change it. It wasn't loading right. I could only do it on my phone. I got the swap in with 5 seconds to go. And if I hadn't got the swap in, it would have been like a 3K night, not a 100 whatever K night. Dang. And that is just DFS in a nutshell. And my wife was like, I'm glad you used the right pitcher because I would not have want to heard from you had you not.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been the worst. That's why it's always tricky. And it's tough to pick something. But like you said, in the end, you chose to go with process and say, this is what I use. This is what I go with. It's got me set. Yeah.
Because like everyone thinks they're smart and they know whatever. And like Malley is just coming back. But like you said, you got to trust the process. And it's not even about like, and I like to say it like this, and this is a good example of it. Like, and winning a DFS slate on any given night is about luck, but being long-term successful is about skill. So like Malley was the better play on that slate based on everything that I was using to determine how good my lineup was. So that's ultimately what got me there. It just took a little bit longer than it should have.
Yeah, I talk about that with people all the time. I think it's when it comes down to like late swaps and different things that they're doing. It's like if that's your way that you usually go, or if that's your style of play, it's tough when you're, like you said, you're a C-Med, you know baseball, you feel this with McGill as well, but you're like, I got to go with this because that's what I'm going to go with. That's what I go with. And if you go that route, I recommend people stick with that route because it won't always be right. McGill could have been the guy that night, but you would have felt better because you went with what you knew was the better range or what the tool that you trust, that you speak highly of, that you would say, this put me in the right spot. I got to use this guy and just trust it. And you did. And it ended up paying off. There was definitely a chance that it didn't pay off, obviously. But the point being is you went with that. You wouldn't have been as mad because at least you stuck with what you believed. The numbers said, all of that. It's something to lean on. It's not even an excuse. It is a process piece where people, even if it didn't go your way, can sit back and say, yeah, but I go this way. This is how I go when I do it. And then you stick to that. And maybe next time it pays off. But in this case, that paid off for you. I think that's probably good. Before we get into the MLB stuff, though, I think you want to talk a little bit about just live finals. Maybe we're going to have some back and forth on that. We talked about being at the live final in Denver. I think you've got some other thoughts just when it comes to live finals in general and being a hybrid episode. I think it's the perfect spot to throw it in.
Yeah, so I kind of just want to do, I'm glad you brought that up. I had forgotten about it. Like your overall like vibe on live finals, because for me, great experience, no doubt about it. Like whenever you get to go to one, always hella fun. I'm sad I missed. I don't even know which one it was, but like Oz Perlman was there. He's a dude I would freaking love to see live. So upset about that. I've had great times at all the ones I've been at. But man, like you talk about payout structures just on normal GPPs and how people, would prefer them to be a little bit more spread out. Even in these live finals, they're so top heavy. You get paid like the min prize way before the contest starts. So like if you go there and you're not successful, it's almost like you're holding your balls at the end. Now, again, like that doesn't matter. You got a great trip, all that stuff. I'm not complaining about the live finals. What I am saying is like, is it worth going after them, considering like I kind of mentioned to you before, like they're great if you get in, but if you don't, it's a big money pit. Just kind of wanted to hear like what your thought on them were. Like, I know you love going to them. Like, how hard do you go after them? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, definitely. It's a goal setting thing, and I've always been about it. I got a couple trophies on the shelf that I've been lucky enough to get a second and a third, never a first. But I will say, like, it's something about just being at the events. I go even when I'm not in. I was at the Oz Perlman one. Shout out to my guy Kenny W 1732. Got a little last minute proxy in for my wife and I to get to go down to Nashville. That was NFL, but I played it in the NFL one. I had a really bad beat actually, which no one cares. Work harder. Like I said, nobody cares. Work harder. But the setup there was. I was really like wanting to get to it. So I still go pretty hard at them, but it's all within my budget. I planned for it at the start of the season.
Okay.
The reason I go after them is because the glory a little bit, like the trophy, you can accomplish a bunch of goals all under one roof. You can get the live final win, the Millie Maker win, or even 2 million. If I could win 2 million before I ever win $1 million in an NFL live final, that'd be a cool story too. I never won $1 million, but I won 2 million. Like that's pretty sweet. But the big thing is really just playing against less people for a better structure. It's almost like you play all the bad structures and that to get after a chance to play in the best structure with the ultimate money up there. But I don't disagree with any of your points. Obviously, they can be a huge money pit, and I really do preach it. And people here watching this obviously know it, being in Mastermind, and they can go check the goal setting and all that. I would not put it first on your list of sort of what you're chasing and getting after. There's just so many better contests. It's how do you want to use your bankroll if you have one or when you have one and deploy it. And for me, I'm very comfortable deploying it in those. And that style of play is more me as well, because I'm playing to win. I'm playing like higher risk, higher reward. So I usually put myself in a good position in those things. And I've had success being able to make it to them, even with all the bad beats. Like I said, you always remember the bad beats, of course. But there's been a lot that went my way as well. So I can't be mad about that either.
Yeah, I got to hear about this NFL bad beat you're talking about, because it sounds like, I mean, I don't want to make you rehash that, but
I think, do you know FJ Bourne, Frankie?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing dude. Incredible player. Also really cool that he like literally shares the story from a high stakes level. It's not like he's a, front and center or a big content guy or anything, but he does post on his X account. Like he's posted like 800K downswings. I mean, like, this is fun. Like he said he does recognize that obviously the game works that way. I've met him a bunch of times in person. He's amazing. But just to note so luckily it was him, but this is actually a cool story. I'm glad you brought this up because I'll relate it back now. What happened was quick and easy. Don't need to go through the pain any further. Was I had like a huge lead, and the only thing that could get me was, and I had Estime and Christian McCaffrey. The Broncos were up 31-6, give or take. They were up huge in the fourth quarter.
Oh, this is like this past year.
Yeah, it's for Nashville. It's for this trip.
Oh, damn. Okay.
And I was way up because I had everything else go my way. It was just nuts. A stack that nobody really had.
First.
Oh yeah, it was over. I was up like 14 points. I ended up getting second by 14 points. I lost to Frankie by 2 or whatever. But what happened was, it happened so quick. They were up 31-6 with like 6 minutes left. Estime's in the game. All of a sudden, a touchdown shows up on the board. But it's the Broncos. Like, they're running the ball. They're up 31-6. All they do is run the ball. I'm like, if that's Javonte, I'm going to be pissed. It'd be sweet if it was Estime. I'd be walking away with this thing. It'd be over, guaranteed. And I look down at my phone, and it's the only thing that can't happen. And it's a Bo Nix to Lil Jordan Humphrey touchdown, who's like 2% owned, and Frankie has him with Bo Nix. So basically, Bo Nix could have thrown it to anyone. He could have ran it himself. He threw like a 60-yard bomb up 31-6 in a 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter game. I have no clue why they were even throwing it. And so he gets me. But the story I'll tell after, because again, nobody cares work harder. The funny part of it was, and that's why I love Frankie, and he's just so honest and open, and maybe he probably won't care that I share this. It was just a back and forth comment. He says, just so you know, he goes, this is my first NFL live final in 3 years. And he goes, it's not for lack of trying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So saying like, you know what that means? I'm not going to, put numbers on it necessarily, but those are big losses those years, talking about chasing them. So again, for all his bad beats throughout those last 3 years, this is his positive. For my positives in other years that I've made it and got there and had things go my way to get me into these spots to have an opportunity, this was my bad beat. So it's not to look at it as the bad beat. It just goes and coincides with everything that you said of knowing that, it's happening to you. It's happening to others. When it's going your way, it's going against somebody else. So it's a really good point that you brought that up.
It's tough though in the social media world where really all you see is winners. Like, a lot is a facade. You don't see about people losing mostly. I think for me, after hearing you talk, and I say this like half kiddingly, like man, as much as I love the live finals experience, like when my teams are like dead or not doing well, I feel like I'm too salty to like enjoy the experience. And that's like you keep talking about like being in the room, you know what I mean? Like even if your team's not in it, like, man, I need to be a better loser instead of being such a sore loser. And I feel like that's combined with the fact that I just have not had success at these live finals. I had a streak of making like, again, I had 5 tickets in that NBA one. I had multiple in the MLB and FanDuel and DK. I had a couple in the NFL the following year. And like on FanDuel MLB, I had one that plays decently high, but nothing special. So like it just has like a bad taste in my mouth. I need to just go in with absolutely no expectations. You feel what I'm saying?
I do actually, and it's funny. Actually, really close to home because you said something there, and I'll just sort of. And I appreciate you being so vulnerable. That's what this is all about, and you're an open book. So thank you. But I can tell you, I like being in the room. But sometimes when I'm in the room, I'm not in the tournament. I've definitely been there with you on that scenario where you're in the room in the event. It's not going your way, and it is just natural. That room, and I've been around these people in these rooms when I'm there enjoying my time, and it matters more if you're in the event than when you're not. And I know not everybody gets to have that opportunity, and I've been to probably a bunch more than most. It's not a brag. It's saying like I get to see this now, but there is a lot of people because we're all so competitive. It's mostly hyper-competitive people, and I've been there myself where it didn't go my way. I was putting it on a pedestal. I'm trying to get the job done and win, feel so good about it, and then something doesn't go your way, and now you're not enjoying the experience as much, not talking to people as much.
Exactly.
The wayside. So don't feel bad about that. That's just natural, but there is something to be said, like you said, for sort of going in, no expectations, recognize that you're in a room with some of the most successful players in the world, that you're part of this group now. And then on top of it, that everybody's got the same potential, the ups, downs, all arounds. Anything can go good, bad, or the ugly when you get in that room. So others are feeling it too. Obviously, you all want to get to the top, but only one person can. So it's just the way you got to think about it. But I've had that same issue in the past of events that I've been in that didn't go my way.
Yeah, I totally feel like when you go and you're not in the tournament and you just go as a guest, you got no expectations. Right. You're just going for the good time. But when you go and like your team's not doing well, whatever, you had all this like amped up anticipation of, my team or however many teams has a chance to do well. Again, this also goes back to like the minimum payout is paid out weeks, months before whenever you qualified for the tournament. So you might be on like a downswing going into that and you don't get anything out of it, at least right then. Like that hurts when you had a chance, 1 in 100 or 2 in 100, or in my case, 5 in 100 chance of like having a really good score. Like that shit burns. You know what I'm saying?
100%. And I'm glad you shared that. I think that's something that people need to hear and understand and recognize. But that's why I think it goes with the other side of it too, is like when I tell people they have to have a goal, like I've made mistakes on this or done a poor job of it where I'm like, I'm not getting 10 to the Fantasy Golf World Championship. My goal is to get in, but once I got one this year, so for example, for 2025, I got one super early. I've got one still to this point in April 2025. So it goes on for I think there's like another 140 events that I could pick up more in. And typically the last couple of years I've had 3. Last year I got 1 of my 3 to the final, and then I ended up bombing it there and coming 47th. Prime example, was not feeling too hot. I was there, I was having a good time with people, but definitely hurt the atmosphere. The nice part about the good, bad, and the ugly, I guess not the nice part, but the thing about golf is it's a 4-day event, and I was dead on Friday. So I could get right back up and be excited about Saturday and Sunday. Just Friday sucked once I knew I wasn't going to have anything happen over the weekend. But do you chase these? These are some of the conversations I've had with people on here. Is like, do you chase them? Because your goal was just to get in. You got in. Do you need 3? Do you need 5? Well, yeah, the more the merrier, because it helps usually. Not always. In your case, like you mentioned, that 1 year. But if you had 5 this year, could be a whole different story. You could come first, second, fifth, and 12th and 80th or something. Anything can happen. But
you always want more for sure. And it's funny you asked like, do you chase them question? For me, like there is no good answer to that. Like everyone has their own answer to that. Like you have it pre-planned like in your bankroll, which I think makes a lot of sense. For me, the first time I ever made a live final, I even went for one. I'd never even messed around with the qualifiers. It just wasn't something I did. I was focused on like, 3-entry max stuff, playing that stuff in like the 555 or whatever, but never really playing like the one lineup or however many to go in those qualifiers. Well, one night I just absolutely loved my NBA lineup, played it in a bigger qualifier, got the ticket. Then I was like, a couple weeks, I don't even remember how many, like I did get that in my mind. Like, shit, I have one, it's early, I want to go get another, got another. It just like kind of fell into my lap. Yeah. And it's addicting when you're going for these tickets. You want to give yourself the best chance to win $1 million. I mean, it's a fine line, right? Like you certainly want to give yourself the best chance when you get a ticket, but you also don't want to chase them. I think the real only way to do it is by having it pre-planned and then not changing it depending on whether you win a ticket or not. Just staying grounded, I guess you should say, and like not changing your process just because you want a ticket. It's really hard to do that. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, one of our members and good friend, she's amazing. Her name's Kim. She sort of pep talked me in this mastermind Discord because I was kind of struggling with it and out loud with people and saying like, I'm not sure what my plan is now. Like I've never got one. I always say that it's right. I never get them early. So I was like, what should I do? And she's like, well, think about it. You did bankroll out X amount of dollars, which I did. And I was like, that's actually a good call. So now I'm going to sort of spread that around.
That's the other thing about it. You do get that. As much as I complained about that payout, you still get like whatever for the golf, 15K or whatever, 20K or whatever, which is still something. Like, even though you don't get it at the live final day, like it's still a nice take home prize.
Yeah. The thing is like, that's how I had to think about it. So I appreciated her bringing that up because I was like, okay, now I got an idea where I am going to set a number now. Like I feel like 3 is a good number. It's what I had last year. I can play the rounds because it's a round one where it's like 300 down to 150 down to 50. And you got to play your way in and only the top 50 go live of the 300 that make it. So I was like, I had to think about all that.
Damn.
But it's different from that.
That's how the LOL one was a little bit too.
Yes. MMA does the same. Okay. Like CFB, I think, did the same. So they try and work it obviously for football, basketball, baseball. And I'm probably forgetting one. I think even hockey plays down. I think maybe hockey, everybody gets in, but it's like 40 people only and they run that many queues, something like that. But either way, the point being, they are tricky. They can cost you a lot, but I think this conversation was good for people to realize that, there's real thoughts that go into them. We're not just throwing shit against the wall and seeing what sticks as much as trying to plan for them. And then also even think outside the box of like, could that, baseball the other night, you could have played a 920 Q probably, and you would have won the seat. Sure. But it's worth what? 10 grand. And then whatever happens at the live final versus you played less money, 888, but you shipped 100K with just that lineup. I know you had other line like the 254 max. It was in all that I'm saying, but just on that same $900-ish instead of the queue with the opportunity at $1 million, you took 100K right now. And
for me, unlike you, I don't have like the pre-plan in my bankroll to play qualifiers. Like I will play them if my bankroll gets really good. I will splurge. I don't want to say splurge, but I will play just like, a lot of people, not even play heavier, but maybe play different contests, try to get into a qualifier. But that night, that wasn't even like part of my thought process. You know what I mean?
So it is good because it's twofold. Funny you say it's not even part of, but that's what's not part of your mind. Your thought process is part of your actual DFS process, meaning you're not playing these because you recognize they're fun and they're incredible and the opportunities there and all of that. But at that moment, we're playing for money tonight. We're playing to get the bankroll boost. And now you can make decisions if you want to get involved in those streets. Yeah, dude. 150K or whatever. And
I got to say, like, I knew you were this is the first time we've ever had a chance to really sit down and talk. But like, you've got me motivated to get back to a live final. If for no other reason than I feel like, not that I've wasted my experience there because I've had great experiences. I've brought my wife. We've had a great time. A lot of time, just me and her doing whatever. Brought our daughter, etc. But like your outlook, and this is why I really respect what you do and have respected you for a while, is so positive. And I feel like the next live final I make, I'm going to remember this and just be appreciative of the moment and like be appreciative of the people you're around. It's a lot easier said than done when you're in that moment and you want that milli or 2 milli. Like it's easy to get caught up in that. But like ultimately, as you said, like you're in that room for a reason and like appreciate it. So appreciate that, bro.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. This is from my own experiences of making those mistakes and not appreciating the moment and realizing that I'm in a room that others would, be very
totally, man. I got regrets for sure.
Yeah, I try and teach as much as I can, to help people learn from my own mistakes and learnings along the way, and that's certainly one that now I've, just learned to adapt from that and just be there. You're in a place that many others would love to be. You achieved a goal. It was getting there. You can't always control. I liked what you said earlier about sort of it always comes down to luck, but it's not, that's the short term. On the given day of the live final slate, there's going to be a lot of luck involved. You know why? The best of the best are in the room. So it's like they're all going to be good lineups. You're not getting away with very many mistakes. It's whoever comes out ahead that day. And sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. Like sometimes it's an extremely sharp lineup that wins, that really took advantage of the slate and all the news and the last minute stuff, going back to the Denver one petty theft, where there was the late Dallas news with like 5 minutes slate start.
That destroyed me. Like with 5 lineups, that news, we're just waiting for that news. Like my process was not sharp enough at that point. Like, you know what I mean? So,
And so he had, just to say that quickly, because not everyone will know the story, but it's funny because he had 5 lineups as well, which for those who don't know is the max. It was a for whatever reason in the live finals they could do a little more than 3 because usually it's like 3% of the total entries, but 5 because you have to win in or whatever. So anyway, he has talked about this. When he retired from quote unquote retired from NBA DFS, I know he came back in the streets and won like $250K the other week. But the point being, he and won football that previous week too. So he's just a killer. Love Petty, and
when he came back in that NBA tournament though, like out of nowhere, that Millie Maker or whatever it was, just wow.
The thing was though, he talked on Laws about saying, like the show with Pete and Brick. He was saying, talking about preparation. We've talked about that a ton, so I won't rehash fully, but just with you here, it was kind of saying like everyone plans to play DFS for the night. Like I'm playing an NBA DFS tonight, he would say. But that's what everybody's doing. He's prepared to play. And the difference is he has CSVs on lock, ready to go for if this, then that. So if this news hits, which everyone's waiting on the news, but everyone's waiting on the news and then adapting. He's already got the adaptation ready to go, and then the news hit. So when that news hit, he didn't need to do much. I'm sure it was still stressful in the moment. I'm not saying it was like not a surprise, but he's done it so many times. He's put himself in that position so many times to be ready for it that it was second nature, and it showed. He won. So that's the cool part about live finals. Let's move on. Let's go to the MLB DFS stuff, because I've been dying to ask you this the whole time. I've teased it like 6 times. One of the biggest things I've had fun talking about with Mastermind and going through with people and the questions coming up and trying to break it down. And I really think this way. It's just not always easy because you got one lineup. But I wanted to talk to you about this. There's a big difference between single entry, playing the $100 single entry tonight, or the 121 is the common baseball single entry. You're up against everybody in that tournament with their best lineup that they're putting forth and your best lineup that you're putting forth with your reasoning behind why you're playing this single entry lineup. And I know these can be the same, but because we'll find out with your answer. But what is your thought process around single entry versus you the other night played one lineup? It wasn't a single entry tournament. You were covered many times over in that 888 by regular MLB pros that have the max entries. You talked about all these good players earlier and people there was tons in there that had the max entries. You played one lineup. What is your thought process on when you have one lineup and it's not a single entry? You know that there's people that are really good players that have you covered. Are you just playing the best plays? Are you looking at something particular? What's sort of your process on this? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so again, I think that it is worth pointing out that like that specific night I played one lineup, but most of the time in MLB I'm playing like 3 to 4 lineups. So in that 250, I'm playing 4 in that, and I'm playing usually like 4 in the whatever 555 or 888, and depending on what size the contest, and it'll have like a 10 to 15 max. So for me, I guess, on that specific night, just taking me back to my thought process, like I play those contests enough or I'm comfortable. Like, sure, if I had the time and I wasn't on a show and I didn't have anything to do with my wife, I would have played 4 lineups and maxed out the 250 and, not maxed out the 888, but had like, 2/5 of the entries in there. Not ideal, but also not a 150 max type setting. I'm comfortable with that. Like one lineup in contests that like, I don't know what the 888 was that night, but I couldn't have been more than like, 10 to 15 max, like
something like that. I think,
most nights I'm not going to win that with one lineup, no doubt about it. But, also you have to consider, and I did consider, where I was going in that one lineup, I wasn't going to play the most popular stuff. Certainly, I don't think anyone's going to argue that like the more lineups you play, the better chance you have. And I'm personally of the opinion that like, instead of playing, one lineup in the, especially for people starting out, instead of playing like one lineup in the big $15, play, 3 $5 lineups in smaller contests. But on
Yeah,
that
there's no
same
$5
token, like
that you can
it's
play.
all in the eye of the beholder, right? It's all like what you're signing up for. If you're playing that big 15, you know that your chances of doubling your money or tripling your money are a lot smaller than if you play that $5, but you're not going to win, 50K in those $5 contests. So I feel like how I played it is probably not how I would advise people to play it, but I'm in these streets every day. You know what I mean? Like I know what I'm signing up for. So I personally wouldn't have changed anything. But again, like I do this all day. I do this for a living. So I feel like while I wouldn't advise someone to play that way, I'm kind of used to those settings, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I guess what I was going to go with there, and you said a couple pieces on it, so I'll try and tie it back together for my thought process, was just like it felt to me in looking at the lineup, remembering the slate, breaking it all down and going back. And I apologize, I don't have it up on the screen here, but you talked a little bit about it. But just in general, to me, it felt like you basically said, I know kind of what the field's doing. You mentioned your exact words now were like, I wasn't going to play the most popular things, meaning the players, the pitchers, the stacks, all of it. You could play some of it. But the idea is if there's 10 people with the 15 max, and let's say it was a 15 max that night and there's 10 people with it, and that's 150 of the lineups right there, and they've got you covered for all these most popular versions. They've got 3 versions of the most popular version and all this. It felt to me like you kind of just said, I can only put one in. I'm high on this side of things anyway. Like I like the Athletics. I like this pitcher. What does that make happen? And then just go against the field in a sense, not forcing it as like the worst plays against. And I think some people, misconstrue that too. Like, oh, if you're not playing the top pitcher on the slate, you need to play the bats against him. No, you don't. You could just say that the top pitcher on the slate, the high price pitcher that everyone thinks is getting them 30 plus, has an okay night with 18 to 22, and you find that with somebody else, but now you get to pick up different bats because they need to now punt to other bats. So I felt like you took on the slate from that perspective, knowing you're comfortable playing one lineup. Doesn't really matter. You're good enough in that field to say, I'm good with this. It's hit or miss. Maybe it wins it all. Great. If not, maybe I cash, whatever. Playing to win, though. But it felt like you were willing to just go away from the common theme, knowing that people would have you covered. And I do think it kind of coincides with our live final conversation earlier, is if someone has 1 and everyone else in the room has 5 to 10 at an NFL live final, well, playing the best plays or the top stack on the slate or all that, like those things, it can only get you so far because they might have 3 versions of that in their 10, and you've got like a 3v3 against them, and you need now the perfect thing to go your way. You'd be way better off to go for the other way around that because there's 10 or 12 people that have you covered that way. So just little things like that I think of. I'll let you go again.
Yeah, no, totally. I think you said it really well. Like the other part of this, and it kind of goes all hand in hand with what we've been talking about, my background being in this for a long time, doing this, the contest I play, I'm looking at ownership. I'm looking at all of Stochastic's tools like all day, doing my process. But I also feel like just from playing this, especially the contest I play, I have a better grasp on what ownership is actually going to be than, I don't want to say I have it better than projections, but I've got a really good sense of when guys are going to be much more inflated than ownership is projecting, and when guys are going to be lower owned than were or whoever is projecting. And a good example of that is Molly. Stochastic loved Molly that day. For right or for wrong, obviously it worked out that day. The ownership on him was projected to be lower than it should have been. I knew that it was going to be even lower than that because no one was playing Molly. I have my ear in this industry. I listen to stuff. I'm using tools from basically every big website. So I know what is being pushed out and what's not. And Molly ended up being like 5% owned when he was being projected to be 12% owned and under owned at that. So that kind of pushed me there. Certainly I'm going to be wrong on stuff like that. And I'm not saying again that I can project ownership better than the tools, but I do think that having your ear on the ground and following where people are going, especially in smaller field stuff, which is what I play, is really important.
Yeah, I think you said well said there. And think of like, that's like you said, that was the ultimate trust your process thing in the end, because it was like you already kind of liked him at 12%, but you were like, I really think this guy's going to be like 5 to 10 range. Could be, could be around 5 even, or up to the lower end, 5 to 8 range. So if I like him at 12, I like him even more at that. I'm going to trust it and roll with it, even if that is at 739 with a 740 lock. It doesn't matter when, as long as you get there before lock, you got there and you got to the result. So I think that was a key component for me. When we just go back to some broad stuff with baseball DFS, MLB DFS, I should say in general, what is it like when it comes to pitching and stacks? I mean, if we start there, what are sort of the key components that you're looking for in a grand scheme of things, knowing that you also know ball, but then knowing DFS and applying it all together? How would you frame that up?
Great way to, I was going to say great question. All your questions are great. Great way to phrase the question. So yeah, it's again, so as far as starting pitching goes, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Baseball is not, it's projectable to a certain extent, but not nearly as much as a sport like basketball. I think this is also why, side note, I like League of Legends DFS so much. It's very much like MLB DFS, and that you pick teams that want to win. Generally, the teams that win are going to score well. Certainly, there are nuances there, and there are, you need to know what you're doing, but I like MLB in the sense that I like the stacking proponent of it. Before I talk about that, though, I like how you asked me about pitching versus stack. So I'm of the opinion, and I know this is counter what happened the other night, because a big reason I had that success and won those tournaments is because of Tyler Malley. I'm of the opinion that most of the time, not all the time, pitching does not win you tournaments. Pitching can certainly lose you tournaments. Pitching does not usually win you tournaments, and I want my pitchers to be good. I don't necessarily need the top 2 pitchers on the slate. Now, if you're playing 150 max type stuff, you might have a little bit of a different opinion there, but I'm totally fine riding pitcher ownership, popular pitchers, if I think and the tools are telling me that they're good plays. Now, certainly not afraid to get off bad chalk pitcher ownership. You got to really be, know what that is and know what you're doing here. That kind of goes into the knowing ball part of it. But I'm much more apt to ride with chalky pitching than I am with chalky stacks. Now, I'm not afraid to use popular stacks, but hitting is so difficult no matter what spot guys are in. Hall of Famers are going to fail 7 out of 10 times. That it's just really, really hard to project. Pitching is a lot easier to project, and good starting pitchers, especially the elite ones, are more often good than they're not. So I don't know if I look at pitching differently than most people, but I'm just not as interested on a slate-to-slate basis as getting different at pitching. It's just so easy to get different on offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's also, too, like a couple things you said there. One would be the fact that, like, you could kind of go with once you go different on offense, you also can, if you have the money left over, you can land on the chalk pitchers, because one, we already talked about how that chalk can typically be better. It's almost like running back chalk. In football, we kind of have the props, we have the numbers, we kind of know what's going to happen, so you feel good about it. But there's a pitcher in every range that can fit that mold. So as long as you're not going with all the chalk on the bats and all the chalk on what everybody else is doing, you can find ways to get naturally unique. And I've noticed that a ton digging into baseball even harder this season and looking at Saber Sim with the Sims there, and you've got Stochastic and just mentioning all these different things. So I think that was key. And then just a little side nugget on the the Hall of Famers going 7 out of 10. I think that's like really hits home, because I always use that analogy when it comes to DFS mindset. When it comes to, you talked a little bit throughout this about downswings and like how you can be on a downswing going into something or this, that, and the other. And it's like, if you think about it from that perspective, you got to apply that to DFS as well. And you're going to lose 8 or 9 out of 10 times sometimes in DFS, but that one time could make up all the difference. And it's always the thing that people talk about in sports and things like that. Like a guy can fail in game 6 and it's like, damn, dude, you really cost him the game. And then he comes back and you could, hit a grand slam in game 7 to win the World Series. Like the most walk-off crazy thing of all time. That can happen. I'm not saying an exact example. I'm just saying that's what people don't always realize. Sometimes the negative piece is what builds you up, or that resilience for the positive piece the next time around, or it's the motivation or whatever it might be. So I don't think people realize that enough. It's, someone said, there's a famous quote, I forget whose it is, so I apologize, but it basically said, like, if you knew you were going to succeed on the 51st time, how quick would you be willing to fail 50 times? Great. Like if day 51 is the payoff point, I'm grinding that 50 days. I'm grinding. Like, let's go. Because 51 is going to be the payoff point. So it's, you don't know this stuff, unfortunately, but if you are putting in the work, you're thinking about the things that we're talking about, you're doing all this and dialing it up together, there's going to be more opportunity for you to get to that day. You just don't know what day it's going to be. And that's kind of the beauty of it too, right? You never know when it's going to be, right? You usually play 4 lineups. And again, you've had a ton of success and different wins. So we're just focusing on this one from the other night. But the point being, that night, you kind of were like, man, I'm busy. My wife's important to me. I'm doing a show, this, that, and the other. I'm still going to play. We're players. We're going to play. But I'm not going to focus on my 4 max. I'm not going to do all this. I'm going to play the best version of the 1. I'm still stressing it to the wire, 7:39 p.m., tie it all together. But I'm playing to play and I'm playing to win, throw my 1 in and see what happens. And that 1 ended up being the one that you needed that night and was the number 1 up top, had a 1 in front of the top prize for 100K. Like, just everything was that way. And sometimes it's that part of it as well. You just never know when it's going to be, regardless. Some days you grind everything and have terrible results, but you played good. It just, you can have good lineups, bad results, and you can have nights where you don't spend as much time in it and ship the whole slate. But it's all a progress. It's all a product of your lifetime. Like you said, it's all the work you put in beforehand. It's not just pure luck. That night it was, sure, like you said, but the long term that you mentioned. So I think it's one of my big takeaways on this. Is there other stuff with MLB DFS that you sort of could hint, like just some topics or any tips that you have or anything else you could give to people? Because I think we'll end up having to do a second show. We vibe already, and there's a lot of different stuff that you've talked about that I think we could lean on and go further into, but some of the topics, to keep it relevant, I think we spent a lot of time on certain ones.
Yeah, totally, man. I'm always down to chop it up with you, bro. This has been a lot of fun.
For sure.
So just real quick, as far as MLB goes, because I know we talked about like pitching and bats and separating them. I personally like to, and again, I'm playing, let's say 4 lineups. I like to really have a small pitching pool. I'm not using different pitchers in every single lineup. Maybe that's to my detriment. I've had more success doing it my way, so I'm not going to change. But I'm having a small condensed pitching pool. I might only use 2 pitchers in all 4 lineups. Like, that's certainly a possibility. I'm not always going to play it like that. Everything is slate dependent for me, as it should be for everyone. But I like to have a condensed pitching pool. And then talking about stacks real quick, we could get real granular and in the weeds about this. But I do feel that like ownership on stacks, especially when you're playing small field, and there's not like a Dodgers and Coors or anyone in Coors, or like the Dodgers against a crappy pitcher. Like tonight, for example, you got the Dodgers against DeGrom and the Coors game has been rained out. Like, ownership matters. Sure. I don't want to say it doesn't, but like, I think it matters less than the masses think it does. And it really only matters when you have like the insert team X in Coors or the Dodgers against a bad pitcher. Those are really the only spots where I don't want to play into the ownership, because baseball is so hard. Now, certainly I'll lose a lot of slates like that, but I think in the long run, I'm more profitable than playing those really chalky spots. Other than that, I'm just not that worried about ownership in baseball. It's so much different than the NBA.
Yeah, great call out. And I think it goes to some of the stuff you talked about earlier too, but like that's where people just look to get different for whatever reason. Literally, but they're so chalky. It's like, actually, no, like they're shorts. Like if the Royals are chalk, it's like, yeah, Salvi and Witt are popular and like one cheap guy, but you're building a 5-man stack. There's 2 guys that aren't popular at all. The 3-man that you're putting with it, or the 2-1 that you're putting with it, whatever it might be, your style, those guys aren't popular. And then your pitchers are kind of like middle of the road. You're not even playing the chalkiest one. So yeah, you have a couple pieces of chalk in your lineup, but you're not on the chalkiest stack. You're not on the chalkiest everything like people think they are. And people just pivot. Like, I knew those Royals were going to come through. Then why didn't you play them? Oh, true chalk. It's like, it's literally just insane how it goes. You can do it. Like you said, sometimes you can just play the plays, but it's not who you play. It's how you play them. You can do it. If you're playing all the chalk and the chalk pitcher and the chalk value pitcher on top of everything else and everything, you name it, then yeah, you're probably going to land in the same spot with those super chalky Dodgers lineups against a bad pitcher with the most chalky value pitcher. Like, eventually, yeah, you back yourself into a corner. But like you said, for the most part, you don't have to think about that. Yeah,
and honestly, I do think that just the ownership game, as far as, I just think it gets blown out of proportion. And really, where ownership, is the most prevalent is NBA DFS. And I think that too many people are too concerned with getting off the popular plays. And more so, it's kind of about what you said. I've had a lot of success playing NBA DFS, playing really popular plays in my lineup, and then playing 1 or 2 guys that are off the board. Not like off the reservation, off the island, but just a little bit off the board. Because especially in a sport like NBA, where it's very projectable, you're just doing yourself a disservice, like trying to be only contrarian, because it's just not going to work out in the long run. Sure, you might have lucky nights, but that's all it will be. MLB is funny because you don't want, like, ownership, you don't want to play into it as much because it's so much less projectable, but the ownership doesn't get nearly as high. So it's just a fun game in that regard.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's like it's a Dodgers who hits a bad pitcher. It's Coors teams. Usually it's the road team too, which is funny. And that's like its own little nuance of the game. Like back in the day, everyone would stack Coors and print, make a ton of money. Then it was like, well, it's over-owned, so we're not going to do that. And then people were like, oh, what if I just play the road team only because they get the extra at-bats? Like, wait a minute. The home team, if they're actually hitting home runs and shit, they're going to be getting extra at-bats too, more than any other road team that you're trying to move to. And then the pendulum swings, and eventually people are like, oh, I'm not really playing these guys, and now they're not owned like they should be, and they're actually under-owned at some point.
I never thought about it like this. And again, I hate to cut you off, but you just made a great point and like kind of sideways with it. Like Coors has gotten weird because the Rockies are so bad that they're like not in play ever unless they're playing really crappy pitchers in Coors. So what happens is you've got these teams that don't go to Coors often. You've got teams that play 1 series or 2 series in Coors. The people are clamoring to play, and you don't even have the pivots to the Rockies because they're so bad. So the ownership is just getting even more pronounced on that visiting team. It's a really interesting dynamic when you think about it like that.
100%. I think that's what we're always looking at. And that's where we talk about the game still change. Everyone thinks they got it all figured out, but it's like, it's usually a pendulum swing. It's like, okay, now it's gone too far. Others are adapting to the other way. You're slow to get to it. And that it's no different than people used to be. I know this sounds crazy because now it's like a normal thing, but when the Rockies play on the road, people love putting the pitcher against them now. It actually wasn't always that way. I'm dating myself, but going way further back now, where because they're not even in Coors, but people were still scared to go against them in these roads. It's like, it's not the same place. Like, now obviously people have caught on to that, but just a little note, there's just tons of different changes and nuances along the way. So I think talking with everything here, we'll talk some NBA in the future even too, because you know that quite well. And we can go back and forth on that. But like, even when you mentioned it there, that's another one where, projections do matter. Ownership is prevalent. Like a high owned guy is a high owned guy for a reason because it's very projectable. But you can now mix in with that some lower owned plays. But then again, people are looking for this dime. Oh, this guy off the bench, if he just gets X, if it's like, what about just going who the chalky guy you're not on that plays for the Hornets? Why not play another starter on the Hornets that's nobody's going to because he's a forward or something, and it's a position that's popular with tons of other plays. Use him here at like $500 less. It gets you up to a different stud. Now you got Joker when everyone's on Luka, and you got a Hornet player that everyone's on this other Hornet, and you got this guy at 1/3 of the ownership, and the rest of your lineup is kind of chalky and makes sense and is the good plays. You still are different enough, especially in something higher dollar or smaller field or both. And it's little things like that where you're not even, like you say, you're not going off the island. You're just using a leverage play within a spot that people already agree is a good spot. You're just picking a different guy at the same spot. So little things like that, I think people don't pick up on enough. That becomes second nature with time, but people are just scared of it because it's, but I couldn't play that guy. He sucks. He's on the same court as the other guy that you're playing. And I know their skill level is different, but for one game, for one night, for one setup, like it can easily go your way. And that's typically what you'll see. Then it's the winning lineups are often like, whoa, I could have just done that. Yeah, you didn't have to go crazy here. So I think it's a lot of fun, man. Is there any final thoughts, any parting thoughts? And if not, let the people know where they can find you and everything about you going on right now.
No, I think you were kind of alluding to it, but like, I think it's important, and I'm certainly this way. Like, I'm always trying to learn and get better. Like, I think people are too afraid to like expand their minds, and like, no matter how much success you've had, you can always have more. And this game of life and DFS is ever evolving. So I think, again, you're doing yourself a disservice by not willing to listen and learn. I think that's kind of a lost art. I'm big into that. I learned a lot from this combo. And I hope to continue to do so when we have more in the future. Yeah, man, DFS is a fun, frustrating. It's all the emotions, but we love doing it. And yeah, man, full swing of MLB DFS. You can catch me on X, as you mentioned, Fantasy Tips Matt. My screen name on DraftKings and FanDuel whenever I venture over to the blue site is mbelman967. I do shows for Stochastic 3 to 4 days a week. I'm on, I think, tomorrow and Sunday, so you can catch me over there. And I'm available. If you have any questions, anything you want to know about anything we talked about, you can DM me on Twitter, find me somewhere. I am always happy to oblige and respond. So, yeah, man, really appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing it. I'm going to get you a link here once I get this edited, posted. It'll probably be tomorrow or something. But once I get it done, I'll get you a link to the community so you can hop in and join in to the mastermind spot and get there. If people have questions, they can reach out. I know that you're the helping type. You're an open book when it comes to that stuff. So really appreciate you doing this, Matt. Thank you so much. We'll have another conversation in the future. For everybody watching, we appreciate you as always. Thank you. Any other questions, put them in the Discord, and we'll see you next time.